Hi there, research nerds. Did you ever wonder why marsupials don't make the best researchers? They don't have the correct qualifications. Now, today we're going to have a look at quantitative and qualitative research methods. If I could just get you to pause the video here and write down your vocabulary, you will have something to refer back to as we move through the lesson. So the focus of this video is going to be research methods, in particular qualitative and quantitative. Now, it's really important to understand that these are overarching strategies. They are not the way that we specifically collect data. They are not specific techniques. They are the umbrella terms which different types of data collection techniques fall under. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about data and the types of data. So qualitative data has a real focus on words, right? Perceptions, ideas, and concepts. These are the things that we tend to be talking about with qualitative ideas or qualitative data. You'll notice that it describes something using, again, the words, how we understand something, how we perceive something. They're descriptive data. Now, our quantitative data focuses on numbers, measurements, and has a bit more of a narrow focus usually. Now, your average scientist will tell you, and I will as well, that these types of data are still descriptive. They're describing what's happening, but again, we're looking at numbers, so it's a bit more of a narrower scope. So let's have a look at quantitative research in general. The features are that it's expressed in numbers. There is an emphasis in objective measurements, and I put a little asterisk there because when we talk about objective measurements, we need to acknowledge two things. One, they're actually not objective. All measurements are influenced by the measurer or the observer in one way, shape, or form. They just are. It's just how it works. And we bring our own biases into that. And if we don't acknowledge those, you're probably going to have a hard time when it comes to research. We also usually have a larger sample size. N meaning the number of groups, things in our participation in our research usually equals many. So a larger sample size, that's what the research is being done on. And the focus is on mathematics or statistical analysis. Again, that's not non-existent in qualitative research, but it's more the focus in quantitative research. It's useful for testing or confirming a hypothesis. And we do this using data, right? Like we can use experimental measurements, surveys, observation of subjects. Like we can count, say one of the things that teachers will often look at is student engagement. And one of the things we'll look there is we'll count to see how many times, I don't know, kids raise their hands to ask a question, or how many times, how much time kids spend speaking or engaging as opposed to the teacher. And there's also collection of organizational or institutional data, so stuff that wasn't actually intended to be for this research, but we can collect those numbers of a large scale. So for example, if we wanted to know about the religious breakdown of Australia, we could by all means go and ask everyone, or we could look at the census and see what's already there. So now we have a look at qualitative research, and it has features such as it's usually expressed in words. It's descriptive, so it categorizes, interprets, summarizes. It acknowledges its subjectivity, and there's something that we all wish that a lot more quantitative researchers would do as well. So it's actually a genuine problem. Usually there's a smaller sample size, right? But that's often just a function of the type of research. So if we wanted to know what people actually think through interviews and open-ended questions, that takes a lot more time than it does to go give me a rating of your feelings on a scale of 1 to 5. It's useful for understanding an idea and formulating a hypothesis. It's also useful for researching an hypothesis as well and developing one, but it's mostly used for formulating one and then understanding what is going on with the quantitative data as well. So the data we use are experimental or natural observations of phenomena. And we're going to talk about this little moth up here in a minute. Interview, open-ended surveys, so really open-ended questions. Focus groups, so we get people around. And again, that's when we're exploring ideas and understandings, perceptions. Literature reviews, case studies. These are all good types of data that we can use. Now, back to this moth. For example, often we'll think of quantitative data being the one used in science. And yes, quantitative data was used to make this prediction. But Alfred Russel Wallace, who was really important in the field of evolutionary biology, he discovered in Malaysia that there was a flower that had nectar deep inside of it, but it had a really long tube, or flower basically. The flower was really deep. So his research made the prediction that there must be a moth because the moth was what was feeding, moths were feeding in the nectar and the flowers in this area. And it was colored in the way that moths feed. Like, so for example, if the flower's bright red, it's more likely to be useful for birds. White and yellow flowers tend to be for insects, for pollination. Anyway, so he predicted that there was a moth that must have a proboscis, or a nose that rolls out like a tongue, that was about 9 inches long. So I guess that's like 20-something centimeters. He predicted the existence of this moth, and eventually this moth was found in this part of the world. So that's using our qualitative data, our natural observations of phenomena. Like, for example, there's this dirty great big flower that's bigger than all the moths we've ever seen, to make predictions. So both fields of research are just as valid. But then, ¿por qué no los dos? So mixed methods are when we combine the both. And this is what the pinnacle of research tends to end up being, right? But it costs more money and it takes more time and effort. And that's something we need to work in. So sometimes one research task will be the qualitative, which will then go to the quantitative in exploratory research. We start with qualitative, we move to quantitative, and then we combine those to synthesize our insights. We can also have explanatory research where we start with the quantitative. We get like a big selection of data, and then we will narrow down our research to do qualitative research to gain out and synthesize our insights then. Or when we have loads of money as a researcher and we have funding, we can actually do dynamic research where we move between the both and our insights feed into both ends. So those are our different methods of research. We have quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. I hope that made a lot of sense. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.